So thank you very much to the London Feminist Film Festival for doing this and for bringing together the films. A lot of really fierce, transgressive, militant women in the work, some of which we had the privilege to see on the screen, so thanks for that. My name is Jessica Horn, and we have with us here Anna and Em, who are people that produced the film 30%. And we also have Dorett, who's an activist based in London, who does work with Imkaan, and she also has done some film interventions from a feminist activist perspective. So we were going to just give our brief reflections on what we've seen, but then, as I said, it would be great to get a conversation going with you. So maybe we can start. So I'm interested for both of you, since you know, it's great that you're actually here in terms of people who were involved in making the films that we saw, to speak a little bit about the impetus behind 30%, and then also maybe just a little bit about the process of it. It was quite an interesting film aesthetically in terms of incorporating you know, the painting, animation, and what have you, so to maybe just speak a bit about that as well.
Okay, I'll start because Em was the wonderful animator for the film, and we answered a call to do a film about women in politics in Sierra Leone, and it seemed to me that that was quite a difficult film to make interesting for the people that you want to see it. And I thought, oh, well, if Em animated it, and if Jenny Cuff, who is a brilliant BBC radio reporter who knows about African politics, was part of it too, and I'm an artist, not a filmmaker, if we could put a team together like that, then they might be interested. And so that was why we did the film. We won the commission, which was a very small amount of money. We went and we had to make a film we were asked to make a film that was showing the positive sides of women as role models. The women were pretty well chosen for us, and we went along with that, and we had 5 days in Sierra Leone. We had no electricity, and we came home and worked very hard to make the film in just a few weeks or months.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I was, I was involved obviously in shooting the film out in Sierra Leone with Anna and Jenny, and putting together some of the ideas, but mainly doing the animation, which I produced afterwards. So yeah, it's that. I suppose the animation you saw there is just sort of representative of my technique, really. I use oil paint on glass, and it's all hand painted, just frame by frame, using a kind of rostrum setup, so camera above, lighting to the side, and then I just paint on a glass plane. And it's quite laborious, as you can imagine, very slow. So that was what mainly took the time. Well, while Anna was busy editing the film, I was busy animating, and we were sort of doing it in tandem and kind of sending over ideas to each other all the way and kind of developing it together. So yeah, it took quite a long time, but yeah.
I don't think most people would think that was a long time to make the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, we worked pretty hard.
we were asked to make the film in, we went out in November, and we were asked to make it in time for Bird's Eye View, which is, I think, March, February? So we had quite a pressure to get it done in time. In fact, then Bird's Eye View didn't happen that year, so we had a bit longer to just tidy it up.
Dorett, I'm just interested in terms of your impressions about the films, and then we'll also go to you two, and then we'll bring it out to the audience for discussion. Given that you're part of activist work that engages a lot of these issues, what some of your impressions were watching this series of films?
Let me just sort out my mic. First of all, I think all the films were really, really powerful. Yeah, I think they were all powerful. They all had themes that obviously at Imkaan we work with. Actually, wait, can I just say something?
What I'm left with after the last film is that little girl. What I'm left with is what's happened to her. What I'm left with is, did she get any support? What happened? What happened? So that, I just needed to say that because that's right there for me at the moment. That 9-year-old. So I think a lot of the themes in the film spoke about. I mean, we can all say what they are around agency, human rights, freedom, but also all the other elements that women are dealing with, just in asserting their rights, and the impact that has, the impact poverty has, the impact of different economic drivers, what that then happens, even for those women that were educated, that had a particular career or status, that they were still fighting for a basic fundamental right. So, I think they're all powerful. I would have liked some of the other filmmakers to be here because I've got so many questions to ask them from a technical filmmaking point of view, but also from how they position themselves, and maybe Anna and Em, you can speak to this, how you positioned yourself filming about other women in a country that's very different to your own experience, and how you navigated that as filmmakers.
Well, it felt quite wrong to be going there to do it. We were asked to do it by the Institute of Development Studies, which is based at Sussex University, so it was quite largely to do with education, but getting the word out there through short film. I think the difficulty, we didn't want our voices to be there. We wanted them to be able to speak about what they chose, what they wanted to make the film about. People were chosen for us. We tried to make it as human and to make the women as much people as we could in their own right, and give them their voice, and that's all we could do, really. I think that's the important thing. But it does feel. Actually, Em, you said a really wonderful thing once, that by animating, and by giving that amount of time and energy to what they wanted to say, we were giving value to what they wanted to say.
Yeah, I guess that was something that I felt that I could add potentially. There is something about animation that is a little bit special, and you don't just animation is not something that happens by accident. It takes a lot of time and energy, and it does put a little bit of a framework or a kind of it highlights something, and it makes you kind of stop and think about maybe something, and it does present those stories in a particular light, and potentially, we're the first to admit that we have put our voices into that film. We have made that film, and I'm not. And I have animated those women's voices, and that's what I've done, and so there is definitely something of me in there. But at the same time, what I, whilst acknowledging that, want to sort of present those voices and highlight what they have to say, so that it can get out there, and so that it can make a bit of an impact, and so that the film can, those voices can go out to potentially the whole world now that it's online. So and be heard. That's the most important thing.
I mean, I know you want to ask questions, but just quickly, I think what I was left with after your film was that there was going to be movement, that those 3 women are going to go out and keep aiming for the 30%. I just got left with a sense of, okay, there's more that's going to happen. Which was really inspiring, and obviously for today's panel, Inspiring Women, I think all the films remind us of what women are dealing with on a daily basis, globally, here as well as abroad, and I think it's great that we're having this panel, because that's what we need to keep reflecting on. Monday was the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against women. So I think it's quite timely to have a panel and inspiring women. So I think, yeah, your film definitely does that. And the women do speak as well, which is important.
And just a thought for myself as I was watching it, I lived in Sierra Leone for a while, so I know some of those women too. But I was also just thinking about the tension that we have in general, and certainly in activist context, trying to tell stories to a media audience that's very, very used to the discourse of the heroine. Is that on the one hand it's so important to have the inspiring women, and on the other hand, how do you actually bring to light the fact that it's movements that make change, because behind every individual there's always a collective of some kind or another, and that some of those people are, of course, sometimes the path breakers, the people who've been very brave, some of the people who've broken ground, but at the same time they're not the only ones. So it's that tension between sort of, of course, telling a story, and we connect to individual stories, in terms of also how we're trained to understand and trained to respond emotionally to history. But at the same time, it's always collective struggle that makes change. So it's that, I think, attention for me watching it. I was thinking, how do you do that in film and still be compelling? Okay, so we're gonna have questions. If you have particular questions for 30%, again, we're privileged to actually have the people who made it here. The other films, obviously, we can't speak to as people who are part of doing them, but we can certainly speak to ideas. So feel free to make comments as well as ask questions. So we've got one at the back already, and I think there's a roving mic which you can use.
Good evening, everybody. I'm from Afghanistan, and for the fourth film, the director is one of my friends. So just probably to ease the tension about this 9-year-old girl, I would like to clarify a few things in very short. The first thing that in Afghanistan, if a man punish or torture his wife, and it gets clear by the medical report in that case and then later if it's clarified by the justice all through, the man go to the jail for a while. It's not long, from 3 months up to a year. So in that case, probably the man go to the jail. But the problem is in the place, right in the place, because in this case, woman can ask for divorce, but the divorce will not happen until the man is not going to agree. And because the girl was underage, she was only 9, in that case, you can ask in the place of the girl. But again, the father was not in a good place because he was the one who. In that place, probably Maria Bashir was a very strong lady in that province. By all these reports and everything that she has on her hands, probably she while, but I'm afraid she cannot do the basic thing, which is divorce in that case. And even if she does the divorce by a very any specific place to send the girl until they will send her to the shelter. And again, views about the shelter are not positive as well. It's going to be a good place for the girls, and all the honor matters will be there. But I'm happy that the filmmaker, the director, Alka Sadat, and her older sister, Roya Sadat and Maria Bashir and Khalda Khorsan, which I heard the voices of them in the film, are very strong ladies in that province. So probably they will make something happen, but not. Yeah, that's the bad reality, that they will not be able to do something very, very basic and helpful for the girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for providing that extra information. Anybody else? Just comments, thoughts? You want to make one too? Critique?
Can I say something while there's a pause? I think the thing that's overwhelming with all of them is men's attitude to women. It's nice to see some women here, but it is changing that we're right in what we're trying to put forward. But how so that the men will listen and take notice. That's the challenge, isn't it?
And I love that moment where the husband is going on and on about what we should be. There's some nice moments in there again of just contesting and actually the discourse is really still valid, whether women want to hear it. So there's some nice moments of transgression. Any other thoughts or questions? Feelings? People, don't be Londoners. Londoners are very unengaged. Just say. We're edited out of this.
I'd just like to ask, when you were making the film, did you feel you were putting the women in more difficulties or at more risk by filming? You say that the women were chosen, more or less chosen for you, but did you get a sense that you were making that less secure for them?
I think probably not. I mean, Bernadette is now the leader of the opposition. Yeah, okay, I think. And I think a film like this, actually, to tell you the truth, nobody in Sierra Leone is going to see this film. There's no electricity, no internet. I looked today at the stats on Vimeo, and every country in the world I could think of, somebody or a lot of people had looked at it, but not one single person in Sierra Leone. So I did slightly worry for Salamatu in the crowd that we were bringing attention to her. She is the one that is in most danger. Just normally, actually, fighting to be in Parliament, as you saw. I think the other two are fine, but Salamatu is okay. But yes, there was a moment when Jenny came round after we were making the film, and she came round, the journalist said, actually the violence has started already for the next election. And my heart just turned over and I thought, that's Salamatu, and is she all right? It was very personal feeling at that moment. But yes, she is okay.
I wasn't going to really say anything, so it won't be very articulate. But I'm comparing the one of the films with the film I saw. I guess it was the third film with the film we saw on Sunday about women's leadership in Africa, and about Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, and seeing the desperate conditions that women in Liberia are in. It just strikes me, how little sometimes power trickles down, even when women are in leadership positions. And I just wondered if any of the panel have any comments on how we sort of reckon with this. Obviously, we need women's leadership. We need 30%, 50% women's leadership. But it doesn't seem, in the face of neoliberalism and privatization of resources and structural adjustment programs and the World Bank getting ever and ever more aggressive, it doesn't ever seem to trickle down to the ground, to the position of women on the ground, as we saw tonight in Liberia.
I think people like Barbara, the lady in the brown dress who is backing the women to support them and make them strong, is a very important role, which you obviously must know much more than I do about, but the way there are people who are backing the women who are trying to make a difference.
I mean, I think it's always complicated. For example, take Liberia. So we can speak to the fact that they have a woman president, the economic disparity between her, say, and the majority of Liberian women. And we can think about, formal elected power. But don't forget that it was actually the mobilization of everyday Liberian women that actually brought an end to the civil war. And those women were tactical, and they were militant, and they were really persistent, and they were doing it in a context of severe economic marginalization and armed conflict. So that didn't prevent them from being able to mobilize and to actually bring an end to a civil war. To Accra, where they had actually brought the rebels, they'd finally actually, it was partly through their tactical work that they actually got Charles Taylor to agree to consider a ceasefire. And when the groups were then taken to Accra in Ghana to basically negotiate an end to the war, so they had all the different rebel factions and they had Charles Taylor and what have you negotiating. Not one woman was actually invited to be part of the negotiations. And the women mobilized through the support of, initially the African Women's Development Fund actually funded a group, then they mobilized Liberian women refugees in Accra, They were not part of the formal negotiations, so they camped outside. And you know, I mean, it's a long story, but I mean, they in essence kept persistently doing all kinds of activist interventions to actually, in the end, force a peace accord. So, I mean, I think when we think about what is political power, those women asserted a tremendous amount of collective political power. They actually brought an end to the war. And, you know, then the question about, again, an elected office or what have you. So, yeah. I think the other thing to remember is just that, you know, people in political power, people in formal political power, you know, having one person in power or even 50% of women in parliament does not in and of itself mean that the agenda that they're fighting is about contesting, say, you know, mining companies or big business and where they are. So, I mean, the politics of the women also matters. It's not just their gender. And so I think all over the world we're all battling with that. But yeah, I think that's just the difficult thing when you think about it's true people are economically marginalised, but being economically marginalised is not in and of itself a factor that prohibits you from being a political actor. And we have to remember that.
Yeah, I also think when we look at women, specifically women in the global south, that the way they occur in a silo, is that better? Yeah. It doesn't occur in silos, so it's a journey of history, of colonisation, of what you was talking about, Jessica, around political power manifesting so many different ways, not just formally, but also how creative women can be in terms of their organising and that collective. And you saw that where Laal Pari talks about, you know, literally being strategic in who she sits next to ensure that she gets the information that she needs. So I'll sit next to a literate woman, or I'll make sure that someone reads the minutes to me. So she's constantly negotiating and strategizing all the time. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of as well.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you could tell us how you specifically use film as a means for activism, where it's a medium that is most often used for propaganda. It's an important difference. I'd like you to address that.
My organisation is a national charity, and our membership comprises of Frontline BME Violence Against Women and Girls Services. So our activism is very much rooted in fighting against violence against women. So the films that I made for our organisation was based on our politics, being black feminists, what that means, what it means to end violence against women. So all of that, obviously, as Anna said, I am in the film, so as I'm making it, that's me. And as well as the voices of my colleagues. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but...
That's in the making of it, that you put yourself in it, so that you are putting yourself on the line.
Yeah.
In terms of modes of distribution, how are you as an activist and as a filmmaker using, because it's distribution, how are you getting that word out there through film?
At the moment, it's through the internet. This type of viewing, screening. So it's through all the different channels, all the different women's networks, and all their contacts, and that's how it's been spread, and mainly through the women's sector. So that's how it's. But because we did it in partnership with the project in New Zealand, what that meant was that it had a global reach in terms of international. So the project in New Zealand, they then spread it out to their networks. My executive director has connections with Jamaica, so it's moved over there as well, and it's networks. An artist, Diana King, she's went onto Twitter and said, I will distribute my music and you know, recognise Imkaan, and all the proceeds from her new single, Bruises, she's going to put towards the struggle and the activist work. So I guess that's how it's been spread.
Okay, but I guess the challenge is to find means of what the sites that men visit to see the work that is.
I don't know, when you say men, that sites men visit, are they? sites
All
that
right,
just...
that was maybe a Freudian slip, but you know, in a sense, the challenge seems to be that, you know, to find means of distribution that are in the hands of men to get this word out.
I think it is a challenge, and we were asked to submit to film festivals, and it seemed really awful to be submitting to film festivals rather than getting it onto the internet to begin with, because our commissioners wanted it to go to film festivals, and I found that really frustrating. However, it got to Sundance, got a lot more, gradually, but it's been going around, and people have heard about it, and then today it's been a Vimeo staff pick, and suddenly every hour there's another 1,000 people watching, and I suspect quite a lot of those are men in their attics. Let's hope they watch it all rather than the first few minutes. But I think, what is a short film for? Does it make a difference? I'd love to know.
I think there's also a tension with what people want to see. You know, ultimately, there's a political leaning, there's a political thinking that brought us all here today. Otherwise, we won't be sitting here. So, I get what you're saying, but there is a tension between that, because if you're going to submit to film festivals, you may get a larger reach, and then there's the question: well, is that what we want? Is it about getting that larger reach? And that brings up loads of different things as well about many of the
Yeah, I think that's. Hello. I think that's an interesting question, and as I'm so happy to be here, seeing all these films tonight. And as an activist filmmaker, a lot of questions I get are sort of about audience, and I talk a lot about like audience specificity and sort of being okay with. I make very specifically sort of radical militant films, whether they be anti-capitalist or feminist or whatever, and I'm very I purposefully sort of okay with audience specificity, and I want fellow leftists and radical feminists to see my films. I'm not worried about conservatives seeing them or necessarily, you know, certain, I don't know, other ideologies, because my films are, or the question of sort of audience specificity is interesting because I think it's okay to make films with a specific audience in mind, because some films have different purposes, and, you know, some films are meant to sort of encourage, you know, other women or other people who are in struggles or sort of going through, you know, things, and so I think, I guess I think like the question of sort of audience and, you know, who you make things for is sort of an interesting.
If I could just respond to that, I feel like it's for me this is like a really big issue that I think about quite a lot, of like how to get something that potentially I might believe in out there and engage with people who might not be interested in it. And I think it's quite important to, you know, I feel like it's really important to engage people, and potentially not necessarily just the people who already believe in that thing. But I think it's a much wider issue about culture. Like when you start to think, oh, you know, beyond just a small radical film that's going to be watched by people in those sorts of groups anyway, and think, you know, I think this is where it's really important that we have women in the big media, writing scripts and making big movies, making culture, and making the kind of culture that people want to watch, making the kinds of ideologies that actually in those big movies and in those kinds of, you know, the kinds of ideologies that then become part of our culture and sort of part of our psyche. And I think that it is really important that we have women in those top positions in the kind of writing of comedy programs or, you know, whatever programs. And, you know, we have people who are kind of like bringing up the women's agenda in all of that cultural sphere as well.
Definitely important we have feminists in those positions. Thanks. Okay, there's... Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My question is, I remember you said the film was not supposed to be shown in Sierra Leone because there's no electricity and internet. So I was wondering who is the audience of the film, And if men of the Sierra Leone are not able to watch the film, so how to watch? Is it for us here to feel sorry for them, or if it's for the men to look at it and get, I don't know, some thought-provoking ideas and try to bring some changes? That was my question. Who is the audience?
Well, it's a question that's very close to my heart, and I'm not sure that I would have made the film had I known that that was the case. It's heartbreaking, but it is the case that there's no internet that can download a film in Sierra Leone, really. I mean, even we never got an email reply from people. It was obviously very difficult for everybody, even the politicians, unless they were actually in Parliament House. So I've been today telling Bernadette Lahai's daughters, who Facebook, could they please get out there and do something about it? You know, it has to come from within Sierra Leone itself. It has been to some film festivals in Sierra Leone. I did my utmost to get the film out there as a DVD. You tell me, I don't know. I suppose we can only hope that the more people out there that hear about it, the more perhaps eventually the people back in Sierra Leone might hear that other people are talking about it.
I mean, it's interesting, I'm always a dissenter, but you know, the fact that in Sierra Leone on the beach you can buy sort of kilos of cheap Chinese bootleg porn suggests that someone's cracked the distribution challenge. So, 15 porn films to one DVD situation. So someone's cracked the distribution challenge. So, I mean, there are actually ways, and I think it's a where there's a will, there's a way issue. So, you know, and it would be easiest if it was on DVD. I mean, again, you know, the way Sierra Leoneans are into their football, if you're talking Manchester versus Arsenal, everyone's on it, man, and they found a way to watch that thing. So, you know, there is internet and there is light, it's just that it's obviously who has access to it. And so there would be ways to create. And so I think that maybe as part of our resourcing, that's something that we can think about in the context of filmmaking and in the context of film funding, you know, to actually think about the distribution follow-up then. So to say it's not only about funding a film, but to fund a dissemination strategy. That means that there can be some sort of, you know, constructed ways to actually enable certain kinds of constituencies to watch things. There is a national television channel in Sierra Leone, for example, that could potentially be screened there. You know, so that kind of thing. But again, it's also, I think, a little bit about funding the spaces and the follow-up, so that that kind of thing can happen. You know, something like this Feminist Film Festival is really important even for us to see it, you know, and we all have our ideas, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of you in this room are activists in one way or another involved in you know, initiatives that are doing things, and I think it's also up to us to then, you know, contribute to the distribution, to getting the word out, and to encouraging people to watch and engage.
I think one of the problems was that she's the leader of the opposition. I mean, she was a major politician, even when we made the film. Well, you know, we could send the DVDs out there, but there's going to be a lot of discussion that it's actually about her political career, which, you know, we wouldn't have chosen her personally. I hope none of my funders are here. We wouldn't have chosen her personally for that very reason, I think. And yet, you know, she was very good at, you know, how she helped us and so on. It's a difficult one. You know, we'd got the DVDs out there, we would be looking as if we were furthering her career. But the three women were different ethnic groups, different political background, and different religions, which was good.
Okay, just a final thought, and then we're going to close.
I'm just wondering, you say it was the School of Development Studies in Sussex, was it? Or who funded your film?
The Institute of Development Studies, Sussex University.
Yeah, so what was the purpose for them to do that?
When I asked them at the beginning, I said, where do you want it? And they said, really, everywhere, on the internet, for education, for the women in Sierra Leone, you know, everything. And that made it almost impossibly difficult to think how to make the film. We've just tried to do it all, but it's made it very difficult.
So they have some responsibility in assisting that process, surely.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that they too were incredibly underfunded. You know, they had a little tiny pot of money. We got £20,000 to make the whole film, and they backed it. And, you know, it was so underfunded, with the support as well as the film.
Well, on that note of poor resourcing, meagre resources, we managed to do brilliant things. So, in absentia, I'd love to thank the filmmakers and everybody who was part of creating what we saw, because it was, you know, quite a beautiful documentation of some really fascinating ways of engaging and challenging patriarchal power. So, onward. Thank you.